I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting on May 15th.
So moved.
I would move to adopt the minutes as amended with David's written suggestions that went out today.
Okay. Everybody support that?
Yes,
Aye.
Okay, so all in favor of approving the minutes is as amended by the edits that I submitted to everyone earlier today, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Great, thank you. I'm going to old business on the utilization. Can you give us a quick couple minutes on that, Charmaine, in terms of where you think this is going and with where you are now, because I know part of this is a transition for you, because I know unfortunately we'll be losing Charmaine, as I think all of you have heard. She has a bunch of family things that are going to take some precedent for some time now, so maybe she can come back in the future and join us, which would be wonderful. And we want to thank her for all the work she's done. So, but in order to make maybe you can give us some sense of how to make this transition with you and Nick. Nick will still be with her. He's not on the call yet, but I'm hoping that John can jump in your in lieu of your work, Charmaine, if you would agree, John.
Certainly.
So,
I have started reviewing the properties a while back, and then things in my life sort of gotten in the way. But I got as far as reviewing Memorial Town Hall, the Powder House, and I got it by paper. There's one more, and it was all an extraction from the DRA and from the actual blueprints.
okay.
To make sure everything's sort of correlated, and it is an extraction of how they exist today. Which my question to you, David, is on your RFPs that you were putting out. It seems like part of the work that I'm doing is going to be somewhat somewhat redundant in terms of what is going to be requested on these RFPs from these vendors to review the properties as they are and their potential as to what they could become. So I have that information extracted. I'll put it all together, what I have right now on those 3 locations. They were previously looked at briefly by Nick quite a while ago. So I'm sure he might have some feedback on them. But at the terms of continuing on all the other properties, I would my suggestion would be take a step back as to what you're hoping to get from the RFPs and how does that work supplement, or is it just a redundancy of what's going to be done by these contractors once they go into these locations?
I think the only overlap, because I mean, the RFPs are really only focused on Jeffrey and Ryerson, and so the usage of that, the utilization on those 2 buildings are not important because those they're now vacant. So therefore it's a clean slate. So therefore there is no utilization on those in essence. And I do think it would be good to finish up Memorial Town Hall, because the goal of keeping Memorial Town Hall RFP is to keep it very lean as a high level overview for feasibility. So that would be the information we'd want to provide to the successful person on the RFP.
Well, I've completed Memorial Town Hall and the senior center.
Okay.
And I
the
think
Powder House, right?
and the Powder House.
Yeah.
And
Those,
so,
the Memorial Town Hall, the Powder House, and the old police station, I think are the three that we want to have, be able to give to the, whoever does the RFP for that.
so what I'll do is I'll put that all together, clean it up, and send it to the team.
Okay.
And then I
so-
guess at that point, John and Nick can take it from there.
And
I did
Peter,
find some interesting things, though, when I was going through it.
Good.
And I thought, is Peter with us at all tonight?
yeah, Peter's on the call as well.
Is unless the DRA, I read it incorrectly, you know, there was always talk about how the Memorial Town Hall mechanically supports the historic building that's next door to it. It also supports the Powder House,
Mhm.
and it also electrically supports both buildings as well as Memorial Town Hall. So I wasn't know if that was sort of known, but it was a surprise to me when I was
Okay.
reviewing. But I will put what I have, clean it up, send it out to the team, and we also revised the way to quantify. Well, we were trying very hard to get from the subjective side of things to more objective on the scales of 1 to 5. And I think, David, we sent you our revised version of classifying those areas to come up with the rating. And I've not really received any feedback, so that's the format that I will proceed to send out with the other documentation to the team, and then all of you can decide whether you want to edit it, change it in some way. But I felt that the old one was a little more difficult it was like trying to put a round box into a square hole type of
Right.
thing.
It was much more subjective. So I think
Yeah.
using your methodology is going to be far better. And like you said, basically, we're really looking at how often those buildings are, in particular, Memorial Town Hall is being used. You know, that's the key one in terms of the open public spaces in Memorial Town Hall, when they're used and how often they're used throughout the course of the year. So
But it was an extraordinary exercise. I loved it. I feel like I just know these buildings by heart and almost become very fond of all these buildings. And no, you almost become intimate when you look at these blueprints and the DRA information. The other thing that I found interesting on the DRA, just as a heads up to you, David, and maybe I need to be corrected, but there were 2 critical areas that I had a hard time finding any information on the DRA, depending on the property. But it was the condition and age of roofs and the condition and the age of the windows. I rarely saw it covered or addressed in the DRA, and I think those are 2 fairly large exposures from a capital consideration. So I don't know, Peter, if you know anything about that, but I found it very difficult to find any info on roofs and buildings.
I have some of that information here because I want to say that most of those roofs on those buildings are new within 15 years. So that's good news. I do remember in my transition period between with Bill McMinn, he had mentioned that all of those area roofs downtown, the Powder House, the Youth and Family Services, and the Memorial Town Hall the roofs have been addressed within the 15-20 year time period. It's important to get that into the capital plan within the next 5 to 6 years because we'll be hitting our max lifespan of those roofs. But I do believe that they have been addressed, but there's been nothing formally put into their documentation of when that's been done. I can get that for you by the end of the week.
That's true. And it was really more just to say, if you're ever looking to find it in the DRA, I could not find anything.
Okay.
I do want to add one thing, Charmaine. We do have an agreement that is going to last another 14 more years with Lee Academy and I believe also the Powder House of providing power because that was a documentation that was given a 99-year lease back in the 40s. So we're going to be that umbilical cord still going to be tied to those two buildings.
Yeah, there's just were more umbilical cords than I thought there were. I was pretty surprised. Oh, and one third area that really isn't addressed, and I think, David, to the point of Memorial Town Hall, may be a worthy consideration when the RFPs go out or when you have discussions with the contractors, is the issue of parking. Because the use will change if we change the use of Memorial Town Hall, and that may have an impact on parking requirements.
Well, that's part of the reason why we were trying to coordinate with Academy, the Academy Planning.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
great. Thank you, Charmaine, very much. Let's move on to the RFPs. I know I've sent the RFPs out to everybody, and I enclosed in the document I sent out today the kind of summary that I presented to the Board of Selectmen on Monday. For those of you that weren't able to tie into that meeting, basically the Board of Selectmen voted 4-1 in favor of moving forward on all 3 RFPs to the Board of Finance, and for us to be generating. So at this stage, we have kind of a concept document, if you will, for the RFPs, and I'll go through each one of them quickly for you. And then the goal is with Peter's team's support and other people, potentially Aaron Mannix's support, we will generate this RFP in a the town will actually town staff will actually do the final drafting of the RFP for us. To that end, and the goal here is to get the RFPs out on the street, engage sometime this summer for all 3 RFPs with professionals, and have them start having presentation information for us in the fall and early winter, because we want to try over the course of basically between October and March, I would hope would be to give some result to the Board of Selectmen in terms of where we're going with these as a result of these 3 RFPs. And I fundamentally think these 3 RFPs are going to shape the master plan for the town by default. So within that context, the 3 of them, we bundled Jeffrey and Ryerson because it's much the same skill set. And although Ryerson is going to be a much smaller focus on this, it's really the studies basically what can be put into Jeffrey predominantly and maybe into Ryerson if we save parts of the building, or if we don't save any of it, is it a site that could be used for something else, for another town function? The functions that we're talking about is Madison Youth and Family Services, Board of Ed, the community functions that were identified in the Academy program that was not approved. I know Peter's talked about the need for more storage for the schools. So, an open space like in Ryerson may provide that kind of opportunity. And we also talked about other options, like whether it's the grounds and maintenance, the grounds DPW, new home might go there, as well as a host of other types of things. So Ryerson has more of a footprint, and part of the comments of the board members, and in particular Bruce Wilson, was to make sure that the town retains ownership of Ryerson property, because that's the likelihood spot for a future school, maybe for construction of a future school. I did point out that one of the things that we want to do on the property of Ryerson is if we open up the vacant land that's adjacent to Ryerson and Brown, we'll need to create an access through Ryerson property to those lands. The Jeffrey is going to be really the the focus of that whole thing. I'm estimating that the budget is going to be somewhere between 50 and 60,000 bucks to do that work. Again, like I said, these things will be moving at the same time. The Memorial Town Hall is really I'm hoping a very quick, I'm guessing it's probably somewhere in the 6 to 8 week horizon in terms of effort, a $10,000 to $15,000 initiative. And the whole function of that is whether it's feasible to bring it back to its original design. And if you haven't seen some of the historical pictures, I can share them, but the original design was there was a stage, there was a balcony with seats, and then there were seats on the lower main level as well. At one point in time, it was also used at the time for the gymnasium for the Hand Academy, the old Hand Academy before Academy was built. And then in 1935, they built the steel structure inside the building to create the office space for the town hall. And then in the 90s, that town hall moved out of there to the town campus, and that's where it is now. So the core issue is, identifying those functions as well as the utilization of those rooms, because we got to find homes for those things. So the probate court is there, the historical society is there, or the historical records room, and then obviously there's meeting rooms in there. Part of the core question in there is with the renovations that put the addition on and the elevator, does that create an opportunity or a problem for going back to where we may go? So that's the goal. Trying to get one of the key elements that was in the Academy project, which was some sort of a theater that could be used in the downtown area, a congregating space that could be used commercially as well as for the town meetings. Yes, Seth.
Just a couple things, and I realize the purpose of this discussion is just to determine the scope of an RFP, but just that scope needs to consider that also the probate court. I didn't hear you say it. Maybe you said it and I just missed it. But the probate court is housed there currently,
Right.
And then also the elevator. Maybe that study should include whether or not that elevator would need to be replaced. I know nothing about elevators. It just seems like it's a bit rickety to me. I may be wrong. I don't know. But maybe the scope should just look at that as well quickly.
Yeah. And I also wanted to make sure that it looks at the Powder House and the other, the other small building right there, because all three of those buildings kind of move together as a site, if you will, as one facility in many respects. Probate court, my view is that if this was successful, and just to give a sense of how this is integrated, if the Board of Ed moves to Jeffrey, that opens up space on the town campus for probate as well as for the archives, which might not be a bad place to put them to get more access and to make it more visible to the community. I think most of the people don't even realize that the archives are in the Memorial Town Hall. So
I agree about the archives maybe, but one thing we have to be sensitive to is the probate court serves both Madison and Guilford. So people in Guilford might get upset if it's moved over all the way to the other side of town. But I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I'm just, that's one concern.
and maybe one of those other smaller buildings could be turned into the probate court and keep it right there on the green. That might be an option as well. So that scope of work is, I'm guessing, around $10,000 to $15,000. I got the $10,000 lower end was a result of a conversation I had with David Thompson, who is the successor firm to Roth and Moore that did the original study. So he was part of that original study that was doing a renovation of Memorial Town Hall back in the late 80s, early 90s. So, hopefully, his sense of that something reasonable can be done for that level. Then the third area is the various land parcels that we identified, acres that were vacant, roughly 250 to 300 acres plus, and or the spaces that we thought were underutilized. So the core question of those spaces included the bus garage. That seems that it's being challenged as a site. As well as DPW that needs a major expansion. And then it also includes the things like what we were talking about at Bauer Farm for potentially affordable housing or workforce housing, as they're calling it. So all those various things, the Green Hill property, the roads on Ridge Road off of Green Hill Road, the properties behind Brown and Ryerson, and also up the properties up by what is it? Way up north. I'm drawing a blank. Sorry, but you know what I'm talking about, Rockland. So all those would be looked at. That's probably going to be $75,000 plus or minus. So therefore, the goal is to set aside approximately $150,000 of the planning funds that Peggy has earmarked, and we should be taking, if this is a consensus of the committee to move forward with generating these RFPs, and obviously you'll get a chance to review the actual written ones and the final functions, but conceptually, are we going in the right direction? And then we'll take this to the Board of Finance on the 16th, I believe, Jude, is your next meeting, where we'll ask for that money to be set aside or earmarked, if you will. It's not approved for spending yet, but for earmark. And then once we send out the RFPs, then the process would be to interview the firms, come up with the selected firm, and then go back to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance for approval. Any questions or comments?
Oh, just one question, David, who will be overseeing the process once the contractor is elected?
Oh, Peter's volunteered, so that's great news.
You're talking for the actual construction or for
No, for the
feasibility work by the consultant?
for the actual RFP work.
Yes.
I think what we'll have to do is we're going to have to split it up between committee members.
Agreed.
That each committee member was kind of going to have to take one of the activities. And my view is that, Nick, I'm hoping you would focus on the Jeffrey Ryerson, given your skill sets and expertise in that area.
So
I just have some history with Memorial Town Hall, so I'd kind of like to look at that, but I'll be happy to help with the vacant underutilized lands, and whoever else can help on that, volunteer to help on that, that would be great.
I think what we'll need to do is create a working group, though, like with the staff, because a lot of this will be getting information from the staff and, working directly during business hours with the consultants. And so then maybe each board member is kind of like the liaison to that project or whatever to stay on top of it. But, I think there's going to be a lot of, information needed, staff help, assistance and all that. So we'll have to figure out how we do that for each one.
Thank you. That's a good idea. All right. Any other comments or questions? So could I have a motion that we proceed with this conceptual framework for these 3 separate RFPs in a total amount not to exceed $150,000?
I think Jude, did you move that?
No, I was going to ask a question, but I'll wait.
No, go ahead. Ask your
No,
question.
I was just curious. I did not sit in on the Board of Selectmen hearing, meeting where they discussed this, and I'm wondering about the one vote that was against it. Was there some reason? Couldn't,
I can fill you in on that, and Peggy, tell me if I'm a little bit inaccurate on this in any way. Bruce Wilson expressed a concern that he felt that spending money on consultancy reports of this type was kind of putting the cart before the horse. And I think the rest of the board felt that the whole purpose of these reports and the consultancies is to help to create a strategic vision so that we have a direction to move in rather than trying to create the vision first and then do reports afterwards. So he expressed that concern and he was outvoted. That's all.
I think also he was very much focused on Ryerson because in his mind, there was a community decision to tear the school down. And that, you know, why are we spending money looking at all these other uses? That building should come down, and he just didn't think it was worth the exercise. So we spent a lot of time talking about, well, it's most likely going to come down, but first of all, it was the Board of Education that made that decision, not the town. There was expectations when the community voted on it that the school would be torn down. But I think it was more out of this, you know, they didn't want to have a vacant school sitting around forever, right? And I think that's what's been driving a lot of the rush to demolition is we don't want all these empty buildings sitting around without knowing what we're doing with them. So in my, you know, I think so we talked that this is a step to kind of make sure that we've crossed our T's, dot our I's, and that we haven't made a decision too quickly on maybe there is some way to save part of the building for storage or some office purpose or other repurposing, you know, that we just haven't thought about. So I think the rest of the board was comfortable with it. I think one thing, David, when we go through the drafting of the RFP itself, I think we need to have it kind of broken out, which I think we did, if I recall, because I know I gave some comments, but like Ryerson versus Jeffrey, you know, and talk about the kind of goals and objectives of each of the different pieces of work that would be conducted. You know, and it's going to be a little bit more limited in scope with Ryerson than it would be for Jeffrey.
The only other thing I would add to that, thank you, Peggy, is Bruce did express, and being the Board of Ed liaison to this committee, I should support the concept that he did express that it does make sense for the town to hold on to properties that are immediately contiguous to our two campuses in case we have to build a school in the future. But I want to make absolutely clear, as we're in the middle of our schools renewal project, that should serve well for the next generation of students. There are no immediate plans to build a new school, at least in the next 8 to 10 years, where the student enrollment studies project that our newly reconstituted building profile should be able to manage the number of students that we'll have. But it does make sense generally to keep contiguous properties available to the town. So if 15, 20 years from now, we need to build a new school, we have property dedicated where we could do that. We don't have to go out and buy. And there's actually property available for us to build on.
Well, and he was pretty clear. He thinks that we're going to need that land for a school eventually. Ryerson.
Yeah.
So he doesn't think we should keep the school, but we shouldn't do too much development on the property because he thinks eventually we're going to have to build another school there.
Yeah. And he talked about maybe putting the school buses there or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that's easier to move, you know, and keeping it relatively unimproved.
Yeah, which it makes sense that
yeah.
we could maybe spare part of Ryerson and only tear down part of it if you can use office space for, you know, Durham School Services or something like that. You know?
I would, if I could, just because I was on the Board of Selectmen, listening to the Board of Selectmen meeting, I took away from Bruce's comments, two things. One was that needs needed to be identified before possibilities for these buildings. And I think that's a fair point. I think the statement about, holding on to the contiguous property and using those for schools later, in theory, isn't a bad idea, but there's a reason why both of those properties were not used as part of the school's renewal program. They're just not very adaptable to that. And so repurposing them for something else, to me, makes a lot more sense.
So I think that I did promise just, and all good comments, Nick. We would send the final draft of the RFPs to run it by the board, just to make sure they could take a pass through it so that there wasn't some red flags in their view.
Right.
So I think once, we're comfortable with those, documents, we'll run it by them and then we can get it to go. Now we still have to get through Board of Finance next week, Jude. So, we'll have a similar conversation, and it might be worth watching the, our conversation, which was quite extensive. So,
Thank you.
Hey, any other comments or questions? Any other discussion? Okay, so can I have a motion?
I do have a question, David. Given what Nick just said, and yes, that is a good point, Nick, that, one of Bruce's points was to kind of do a needs assessment. Peggy, where do you see the needs assessment coming in? Would that be built into these studies, or would that be a separate effort? Because we need to know, because if need is part of the study, we have to build that into the RFP. That's all.
So my understanding is some of the exercise that Charmaine and the team here has been doing is kind of, I guess, looking at utilization, right? I feel like there's been so much information about what the town space needs were back in the DRA study. And that was what some of the steps that we took after the DRA study was to address that, right? Different departments had needs, more space. So we kind of know youth and family needs double the space that they currently have to offer the programming that they're going to do. We also know that there's community demands for some of the programming and everything. I mean, when Academy was voted on, it was people wanted certain types of programming in town. And then we have that whole study, or that whole survey that was done by the Academy committee, not the building committee, but the other committee, during the building process, that identified gaps that people felt like the town had, desire, whether it's theater space or arts programming. There was like this is what we want to see in town. So we have all of that, do we want to start back and do a whole needs assessment? I don't know. I mean, what is that? There's like needs and sort of physical space for existing departments, but then there's community desires, right? So, and then some would argue some of those community desires aren't needs, they're wants, right? So I don't know. I guess I leave it to the committee.
Well, we probably should make an effort to map those needs to the strategic plan that we did last year, a couple of years ago, because that would help us determine as a committee whether those are identified needs because they've been built into the strategic plan for the town, or whether they're just wants that were based on a prior referendum. So
There are needs. Whoops. Sorry.
I think it's very simple, actually. I think the needs are, as Peggy was just describing, between, we know youth and family services is in significant need. We know that just from our work already, from the things that were identified in the program for Academy are out there as needs, and I guess we probably should rank them, if you will, in terms of the difference between needs and wants. we know that the bus garage, for example, is inadequate in terms of size. We've already heard about that from the folks at the bus garage. We know that the DPW site is inadequate in terms of total amount of space. We know that there's a need for and a plan going forward for the hose company number 1 to add the emergency center there downtown, and we need that. We know there are needs at the arts park, for example. We know in terms of the needs that are there for programming as well as for renovation. So, I think we have a pretty good list, more than enough to deal with these RFPs at this stage. And in addition, I think the other things that I'm learning now is because I've been invited by Peggy, thankfully, to sit in on, so I can bring a connection with all you folks on the Surf Club master plan that they've just selected a master planner. So the likelihood is that something's going to happen with that building, and certainly from the impression I got from that discussion is that the grounds department is probably going to have to move because of access parking and for potential moving of the building, which would end up moving the parking lot, which will end up moving the grounds. That kind of effect. So, and then the other thing is I've been sitting in on the academy planning group meetings as well. So hearing what those ideas are and whether that will go potentially to be leased out, if you will, land leased and developed by an outsider, or whether the town should keep it and try to do something with it, or whether the whole thing should be coming down. So to the end of the needs, I think there are so many things we've gotten documented that I think it would be it would slow this process down so immeasurably for no significant extra value, in my view, at least.
But perhaps identifying major needs would be important. So youth and family grounds department is probably getting vacated, as you mentioned. And then expanding DPW. I still don't quite understand the bus garage issue, but aside from those 4, potentially 3, what would we consider major beyond those?
I mean, I agree with you, Nick. I mean, through all of the talking to the people that we've met with, all the buildings that we've gone, there are a lot of needs, but there are some that have some serious time sensitive needs, such as youth and family services have been waiting almost 10 years. They definitely are busting through the seams. In fact, when we had a meeting with them, they had no place to put us. We had to sit out in the waiting room to have a meeting with them. They are starving for space. And DPW, they have incredible amount of money sitting in that building and some structural issues with the structures that are holding the salt. I don't see them being able to go much longer.
Agreed. They have an awful lot of money sitting outside.
Yeah, it's getting bad. So there are needs, but there are some that have like almost immediate needs versus that there are other needs that can suffer through the time to do more investigation. But I'm hopeful when I see these RFPs. It seems to be narrowing the window down to being able, the team to be able to maybe make some tangible, real-time, sensitive decisions going forward, that these immediate needs can hopefully be addressed at a time when there won't be some serious consequence.
And I think the bottom line is that this is going to help us give a broader perspective for the town. That's going to say, here, these are all the open buildings, these are the open spaces, this is what we think we can fit in these spaces, and this is what we think we can't. And as a result, if there is a need to build, then this is what should be. And if there's not a need to build, then this is how we can accommodate it and have some order of magnitude in terms of cost. Now, I think the other side of the coin here that is important, because I mean, this conversation really is talking about needs that are potentially that would focus on Jeffrey Ryerson and Memorial Town Hall. But the real one big core question in my mind is, what is the potential revenue generation opportunity through those underutilized and vacant land parcels? And because I mean, we're going to come up with a cost to do things, and the core question is, can we offset some of those costs by revenue streams that would come from these parcels?
And those parcels are very important too, because you also have the issue of affordable housing, which is a time-sensitive issue, and that all plays in together towards
And
the
we've already
possible
met with
revenue
those
stream.
folks as well. So,
Yeah.
so I think we have a pretty good handle on needs. I'm happy to kind of, start creating a list, if you will, of what those needs are in terms of, and send them out to everybody so we can set some priorities in terms of because I think that the goal is it's the need versus the want. I think Peggy said it the best, so that's the first triage, and then within the needs you prioritize, and within the wants you prioritize, so you can see where things go.
So it sounds to me like when we're identifying needs, then we're really more and I'm saying this without judgment, like just trying to figure out if maybe there's a standard separation between the wants and the needs so we can objectify it. The needs are more in the nature of physical plant requirements for the town at the moment versus like arts and culture and that type of stuff. Is that like a hard, like bright line distinction that we're talking about for the purpose of these studies?
I would think it would be, existing programming to continue to offer existing programming, right? And serve our existing purposes versus incremental, community, things we want to add, we want to provide. Yes, I guess in that sense. So, that's kind of like, stuff that we're hearing the community wants us to provide. I mean, we can talk about the meeting space issue, right? I mean, that's going to be a tricky one because we do have, we have Polson coming online next year. Like right now, we still struggle with, like tonight's town meeting is at Polson. There's no air conditioning and there's no way to offer hybrid at Polson. And that was another thing I got when, I need to make sure, Peter, for that committee, for the Polson committee, that they're offering some of that technology that you have now at Neck River. So the other thing is we have the Neck River opening up, which really does have large assembly space as well, and has drop down screens, stuff like that. So some of our meeting space demands, I think, will be met by Neck River, which will probably be easier for us to schedule as a town versus Polson, right? Because Polson is a little bit more heavily used. And then you look at, but then there's the next level up, which is more performance space. And that gets into a whole nother category of like how big the stage is, what kind of lighting, all this other stuff. So I think, David, as you look at Memorial Town Hall, just reflecting on this, it is going to be limited what kind of performances can be given there. And we learned that through the academy process. The front theater doesn't really offer some people, they hear theater and they think like, Broadway show type things. And then other people hear a theater and they think, 4 people string quartet playing, right? So there's this spectrum in between, and knowing what our different stages can provide. And this was something I wanted to do last year because I said, why can't we sit back and figure out, like, out of performance spaces, what capabilities does each building and stage have in the schools? So I've digressed a little bit, but I think that's part of the conversation with Moore Town Hall. Like, what is that stage actually going to get you? Is it just really a meeting hall, or is it a stage where you can actually put on a play? Like Kids Connect is at the town hall in Clinton. That's not the same as the Kate, right? The Kate is more of a high performance stage. So That kind of analysis, I think, would be very helpful as we kind of look at all this. And the good news is some of the town meeting requirements, I think will be in better shape next year because we're going to have access to Neck River as well as hopefully a renovated Polson.
So let me go back. Can I have a motion to move forward with these RFPs in concept at least, so we can take these forward to the Board of Finance with
So moved.
recommendations? Okay, thank you. Can I have a second?
Second,
Second.
Is there any other further discussions that we'd like to have? No, all in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Opposed?
And I think for Board of Finance, we just do a similar, that 1-page slide that talks about, what's going to be in them without actually sending the RFPs, because
I agree.
they typically don't get into that level. So, okay, good.
Totally agree. Yeah, and I think we're, based on this conversation alone, we're quite a ways away from the construction of the RFP. There's a little bit of work that needs to be done. So I'm going to be reaching out to you, Peter, so we can get this thing going.
Yep, we'll take care of it.
Okay. Any public comment?
We have one attendee, Randy. Wait,
Tola?
1 second.
Cal, is Randy looking for a question?
Yes, he just had trouble getting over. Should be
Gotcha.
all set now.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, I thought it was a very good discussion. I am mostly, the reason I joined was I was mostly concerned about Ryerson and that people saying that it was going to be coming down, which it would be good if the town could come up with some use for it, either lease it or use it for some other needs, as you've been saying here at the meeting tonight. And especially the land, I think, the town, whatever land the town has, it doesn't want to obviously get rid of it or sell it, because who knows what could happen in the future, as Seth was saying, which is very good. So I agree with those comments. But I was mostly concerned about Ryerson and that building coming down. My daughter went to school there for 4 years, and I thought it was a pretty good building. I've heard that it needs a lot of work, but maybe something could be found with it. And I guess that's the purpose of the RFP. I'm not really sure. It's hard to tell what was going on with the RFP or the purpose of it.
But that is the purpose of the RFP, is to kind of understand if there is all or part of the building that can be saved and repurposed to meet other town needs, or if it does need to be demolished. So that
would it include possibility to lease it for a number of years until some new school is built 10 years or 15 years from now?
Okay.
Would that be part of it?
We had interest. The Board of Ed or the district received notification of interest for a specialty education use that would have been conforming with the nature of the building already. But that didn't pan out. And I think there were other options for leasing it out and potentially finding some commercial use that might be consistent with the educational use of that larger property, and nothing has materialized. So as much as there might be some sentimental value to keeping that building intact and leasing it, we haven't gotten any nibbles. So, well, we've got nibbles, but no bites.
Was that through an RFP or how was that?
No,
sort
I
of
think
started?
I think someone through Learn, Peggy, was it? I think through Learn, our regional educational service center, and it was like considered for a specialty educational use, like a
Early
special
childhood
services school.
is what it was for, yeah.
What's that? Yeah,
It was for early child, infant to second grade.
yeah.
Yeah.
Town of
That was,
Waterford State.
yeah, I don't know if it would be a good building to lease or not. I was just one suggestion, but
Yeah.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second,
Okay, all in favor? Thank you all very much for meeting the special meeting tonight, and we'll see you in actually about 10 days for our next meeting.
Thank
So-
you.